This is your reality check.
Hi everyone, and welcome to The Reality Check, the weekly Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. This show was recorded on September 2nd, 2020, and I'm your host, Darren McKee. With me, as usual, are Adam Gardner.
What's up, cuboids?
Christina Roach.
Hey everyone.
And producer Pat.
Hi guys.
We have a great show for you today. Our lovely friend of the show, Stuart Robbins, is going to talk to us about how NASA colorizes pictures from the Hubble Space Telescope.
Ooh.
I'm going to talk to you about former presidents who can't drive. But first, Cristina, are essential oils safe for kids?
My sister from another mister had a baby early last year. And like any new parent, you want to do whatever you can to keep your kids healthy, right? But as we know here on The Reality Check, it can be difficult to navigate the minefield of misinformation out there. Now, my girlfriend is wise enough to do her own research. She looks to facts and evidence. And she had some concern that using a diffuser with essential oils around her baby may not be safe. So she asked me if we had ever covered it on the show, and she sent me a New York Times article from April titled, "Are Essential Oils Safe for Kids?" by Teresa Carr. So Adam, you ventured into essential oil territory on episode 352 when you covered a company called doTERRA. And I will get into them a little bit later, but my focus is specifically on safety and efficacy with kids. And also you covered it back in 2015, so refreshers is probably a good idea.
Been a few years, but I don't remember looking at safety in my episode. I think it was, does it work? Of course not.
Mm-hmm. Now, the dictionary definition of an essential oil is a natural oil typically obtained by distillation and having the characteristic fragrance of the plant or other source from which it is extracted. Essential oils can be concentrated extracts from bark, roots, flowers, leaves, plants, even peel. And as Adam mentions in his segment, they're typically used as an aromatic using a diffuser, which diffuses the oil particles into the air, so you're basically inhaling them. A topical, so absorbed through the skin, or internally by ingesting the oil. Now, if you think essential oils are no big whoop, Teresa Carr says sales revenue in the U.S. went up almost 40% from 2014 to 2018, and that by 2025, sales revenue is projected to reach more than say it with me, Darren, $billion.
Billion dollars. That is more than the movie industry.
So my 2015 segment did not do anything to deter people from buying
Well,
products.
we don't know. The counterfactual could be maybe be 5.5 billion.
Maybe.
And this projection is according to market research firm Grandview Research. Now, I enjoy a nice scented candle or a diffuser once in a while. I actually have one of those Maison Berger lamps. But many scents actually bug me. I can get a headache, and sometimes my allergies really flare up. I'm well aware of the many claims around aromatherapy improving one's health. Adam, I know you brought some of those up too. Live Science actually reports around 100 different essential oils are used for medical aromatherapy in Austria and other European countries. Now, Carr speaks to Dr. Justin Smith, a Texas pediatrician at Cook Children's Healthcare System, who said that parents, they're inquiring more often whether using essential oils, either inhaling them or rubbing them onto skin, can help with things like boost their kids' immunity, congestion, who I have no idea where they get these ideas from, and even fevers, which is scary because, as you guys know, you don't want to mess with anything unproven if your kid has a high fever. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are many sites and social media posts, as the New York Times cites, marketing essential oils with claims they can treat things like, are you guys ready? Alzheimer's disease, attention deficit disorder, depression, and unsurprisingly, I guess, cancer.
Now, just a second. Is this chiropractic or essential oils?
Yeah. There are also multi-level marketing setups selling essential oil for doTERRA and Young Living, which are two of the bigger ones in the biz. And as I mentioned, Adam did a deep dive into doTERRA. I linked to a Good Vox article in our show notes about MLMs, and this is a quote from a doTERRA seller's recent post on Facebook. Just received a new batch of doTERRA On Guard essential oil, so I am ready for you, coronavirus. It's so important to beef up your immune system. So what is the main benefits? That's their little grammatical error. Supports immune system's natural defenses, provides antioxidant benefits, energizing and uplifting aroma. Wow.
Word salad.
Yes. Now, Dr. Smith confirms claims about essential oils and their purported health benefits just don't hold up. Most of the research has been conducted on rodents and in petri dishes. Quote, there are few human studies, and they are mostly small and of low quality. He adds that of the research done on humans, most research studying essential oil safety or efficacy was done on adults. Now, there are a few studies performed on children that suggest, emphasis on suggest, quote, inhaling lavender oil can have a calming effect. Topical applications of tea tree oil may be useful against acne, lice, and warts, and peppermint oil capsules may help with irritable bowel syndrome and abdominal pain.
Also, if you're suffering from certain like carbon monoxide poisoning, it's probably also peaceful at the time as you're falling asleep.
Okay, again, no evidence to support fever, cough, congestion, and as you'll learn shortly, peppermint oil is actually quite dangerous. The bottom line, we just don't know how essential oils affect growing children. And that's not good when you consider that some parents may fall prey to someone promoting bogus treatments. Smith tells Carr's story about a young patient whose parents were treating his croup with essential oil. Now, croup, for people who don't know, is a respiratory infection that causes difficulty breathing and a barking cough. The child got so sick, he had to be admitted to emergency. So in this case, it's not inhaling the oil that caused the croup, right? But using it over evidence-based treatments led to it getting worse. I don't have time to go down the FDA rabbit hole and how they've issued many letters warning beauty and cosmetic companies to stop making drug-like claims. They specifically called out doTERRA, by the way, Adam, and Young Living sales reps who had some of the more egregious claims around cancer and Alzheimer's disease. And not to mention, my girlfriend's concern was around inhaling essential oil from a diffuser. So it was great to see friend of the show, Dr. Dave Stukas, cited in this New York Times article. He is an associate professor of pediatrics in the Division of Allergy and Immunology at Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio, and he's been a guest on our show a couple of times.
And you should absolutely follow him on Twitter at AllergyKidsDoc.
That reminds me, I think he's overdue to visit the show. Now, Stukas says the tiny particles in oils are, quote, really good at infiltrating the upper and lower airways, which can cause irritation, especially in people with underlying chronic medical conditions such as asthma or allergies. Now, Dr. Weber from the National Institute of Health is quoted, children are more likely to have side effects from essential oil exposures than adults are. They are still developing, which makes their brains and other systems more sensitive to potential toxicity from essential oils. As an example, kids' kidneys and livers may not be able to process certain compounds as efficiently. And side effects, side effects include nausea, vomiting, coughing and wheezing, seizures, passing out. Now, it's important to note that the greatest danger to kids in regards to essential oils is due to accidental swallowing, contact with the eyes, and being spilled on the skin. So for instance, a mere teaspoon of camphor or peppermint oil can increase the risk of seizures in kids under 5 years old, some say 10, if ingested. Just a teaspoon. Nana Bauman, who is the managing director of the Tennessee Poison Center, says half a teaspoon of tea tree, eucalyptus, or lavender oil, which are some of the more common or popular ones, can cause difficulty breathing and sedation in little kids. And that's pretty scary. Now, the American Association of Poison Control Centers reported an 85% increase of related cases in children under 12 between 2014 and 2018. Over 17,000 cases in 2018. Now, the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Academy of Family Physicians have not issued recommendations for using essential oils with children due to the lack of good evidence on its safety and efficacy. But for parents who still want to use oils around their kids, Carr and many others in many of the articles that I either linked to or that I looked at outline numerous safety considerations. The first one that Carr says is have a chat with your child's physician. And she follows that with do not diffuse essential oils around infants under 6 months old. You can check out the rest of this list at trcpodcast.com.
That is a great website.
Now, the Washington Post ran an article in 2015 by Tamara Reese, who has a Master of Public Health and is a certified health education specialist. The title? When it comes to essential oils, do your research. She gives some really great tips and stresses essential oils should be used cautiously and sparingly, with particular consideration given to use in and around infants and children. Here are a couple of her tips. do your research. She warns that many guides are written by the companies that distribute essential oils, which makes them biased. So be suspicious of marketing and anecdotal evidence. Some oils can cause respiration to slow in children. Touched upon this earlier, she stresses to never diffuse wintergreen, peppermint, or eucalyptus around infants or children under the age of 10, and says oils can have unknown interactions with prescription medications, which I read elsewhere too. Be aware that essential oils are not regulated by the FDA. She reiterates that we know certain oils have properties that can be toxic to children. And I checked how Health Canada is rolling, and friend of the show and executive director of Bad Science Watch, Ryan Armstrong, has a piece on his great blog, Post-Truth Health, called The Oil Rush, how Health Canada has failed to regulate deceptive health products. So look for that link in the show notes. And there you have it.
Thanks, Cristina, for a saddening segment. Going to your point about marketing, I was wondering, they're pretty slick because the name itself, essential oils, well, oil's relatively neutral, plus or minus, depending if you think of cooking oil or oil in the sea that's harming wildlife. But essential is a very, very positive word. And every time we repeat it, you can't help but have this idea of this thing being essential, when it clearly isn't. I mean, we're being very nice to people saying, if you're going to try to do it around your kids, do this. And I would say, just don't do it. Take the money, buy yourself something better in your own life or something for your child, or donate it to a charity. Stop buying essential oils. But that said, should we start calling them non-essential oils here on the podcast? Well, I mean, it's not just for comic effect. I'm like, this is how marketing works, and we're being duped just by using their terminology.
Start the movement, Darren.
Hashtag non-essential oils. There you go.
And now we turn to a segment with our lovely friend of the show, Stuart Robbins. A couple weeks ago, Pat was curious how NASA colorizes pictures from the Hubble Space Telescope, and so Pat and Cristina had a chance to sit down with Stu, and he was kind enough to talk to us about it, and now we're running it on the show.
Welcome back to the Reality Check, Dr. Stuart Robbins.
Great to be back, y'all.
So, Stuart, you, Cristina, and I were having a back and forth, as we often do. I mean, it sounds like we don't really talk when we have you on like once a month or something, but we actually have a pretty robust conversation going most of the time. And I can't remember the context, but I sent you one of my favorite astro photos taken by Hubble of the Sombrero Galaxy. Actually, I was reading up on the image today, and it's a mosaic of 6 pictures. But when I went looking for the image to send it, several versions of it popped up on the Google. Some of them had a white hue, some of them had more of a purple hue, some of them had more blue-green. Of course, that could just be anyone taking a copy of the picture and messing around with it in Photoshop, but I got to wondering, is the color in an astrophoto, say those that are released by someplace like NASA, is it some sort of interpretation of data, or is it more of an artistic thing? How do the pros put color in photos?
Yes.
Thank you, Stuart.
I'm always happy to
I'm really
help.
interested in hearing about this, Stuart, because I find a lot of people, because, I mean, Hubble, the photos that Hubble takes are in black and white, correct?
Exactly. So
people think that some people, not all people, may think, oh, fake news. You're colorizing photos that are black and white. How? So I think it's really cool. I'm looking forward to hearing you talk about this.
yeah. So to expound on my answer to Pat, because we always like it when I'm verbose on these shows. To expound a bit, it's both for science and for artistry. So what happens specifically with Hubble is that astronomers propose to use Hubble to do whatever science they want to do. If their proposal is accepted, then they get so many Hubble orbits. They basically propose a number of orbits of Hubble. They get so many orbits and they get to record their data, and then they get to do their science with it. So what happens is that when they propose, they say, I want to study X. And to study X, in order to do Y, I need Z amount of time, and I need to observe it in these wavelengths of light. And those wavelengths of light are selected based on the science question. So for example, if I want to study planetary nebula, then I'm probably going to use a wavelength of light that is very narrow and is roughly centered around 507 nanometers or 5070 angstroms. I'm going to do that because planetary nebula are very bright in a forbidden line of oxygen 3. What it means effectively for the science is that planetary nebula emit a lot of light in that wavelength, but in that very narrow wavelength, a lot of other stuff is relatively dim. And so planetary nebula really stand out. But then they also might want to say, I might also want to study it for hydrogen, and I might also want to study it for nitrogen. And so I am going to choose filters that give me wavelengths of light that are very bright for hydrogen and then are very bright for nitrogen. Then what happens is that after, I think it's 6 months, it could be a year or something else, but after a certain period of time, the scientists have to make that data public, or it's made automatically public by the people who operate Hubble. And then what people can do, including a staff of astronomers at the Hubble Heritage Project, what they can do is they can look through all of these data that people took for their science, and they can say, ooh, that might make a pretty picture. And so what they can do is they can take those 3 colors, different wavelengths for hydrogen, wavelengths for oxygen, and wavelengths for nitrogen, and then they can make one of them red, one of them green, and one of them blue, and stack them on top of each other in a program such as Photoshop and make a pretty picture. So for the scientists who wanted that data initially and had proposed it and then were able to take it, they wanted those wavelengths of light in order to answer a specific science question about planetary nebula for hydrogen, oxygen, as well as nitrogen. And I'm making up those things. I don't know if planetary nebula are important in hydrogen and nitrogen. I do know about the oxygen, but anyway, side point. And then, so they wanted to answer that specific question for science. And they probably did not make a color version of their image. They might have, just for fun, and just because it's sometimes easier to understand differences between images when you make them different colors and overlay them. But then the pretty picture people can then take those data and say, well, great for science, but we want to make a pretty picture. And so they make a pretty picture from those data. And what they can do is they can say, well, I like this, but not that much. Instead of making hydrogen red, let's make it green and oxygen red. And then they can fiddle around with those and they can adjust the balance so they can make it a little bit more intense in whatever color they made oxygen in order to get a balance that they think makes a pretty picture. That isn't necessarily as useful for the science, but it makes it a pretty picture.
And it's good for public outreach, right?
Yes.
Hubble
public
provides
education.
a huge amount of NASA's public outreach. And I think that there's also something called director's discretionary time. The folks in charge of Hubble have discretionary time that they can allocate as they want to. So, for example, I know that New Horizons had applied for the New Horizons mission that flew by Pluto in 2015. It had applied for discretionary time to try to search for a follow-up target. And they were given some of that time in order to try to take very, very, very faint images in a field of sky that New Horizons was sort of aimed towards to see if they could find an object that New Horizons could fly by after Pluto. And they were able to find one. They found 3, actually. So that was something from the director's discretionary time. I don't know if it comes out of that time, but I suspect it does, that the folks at the Hubble Heritage Project can also allocate Hubble to make these really massive, pretty pictures. So ones that don't necessarily serve a specific scientific purpose, but is basically allocated under NASA's charter is we have to do public outreach. And so they can say, this is for public outreach. And we want to make a really pretty, really giant picture of a nearby galaxy, say. And so then they can say, I think that what will make the prettiest picture is going to be these filters, and we need these many orbits, and blah, 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 and the rest is posted on the Hubble Heritage website. Does that basically answer your question? And do you think you can summarize it in a way that might be a little bit more compact?
Well, this is not 5 minutes.
Wrong
with an astronomer.
podcast.
Wrong podcast.
Oh, you're right. Darn.
So, Stuart, as someone who has probably seen a lot more raw images from Hubble than I have, because I tend to subscribe to like NASA's picture of the day and subreddits about astronomy pictures. And how surprised would I be to look at a raw picture of the Sombrero Galaxy?
Depends on what you mean by a raw picture.
I mean, a raw picture, the raw mosaic as taken by Hubble.
A raw picture is a picture as it comes off the camera, and it has a lot of crap in it. With your everyday camera, the crap is at a much lower level than the picture that you're taking. But if you or any of your listeners were to ever take your camera phone and take a picture in a dark room, you will see a lot of that crap come out because it has to boost the light levels, and by boosting it has to boost the levels a lot. By boosting the gain, effectively turning up the knob on the speaker, it has to boost a lot of that low-level crap that you normally don't see. In astronomy, we push these detectors to their limits, and we are taking images that are hours and hours long. And so we see all of that crap. And we have ways to remove it. So a raw picture, this is why I was asking, a raw picture has all that crap in there. But there are standard pipelines of data processing to remove it. Once we've removed it, then you would basically see a black and white picture of the Sombrero Galaxy if it was a narrow filter. So something like just a few nanometers wide. So a very, very specific emission line, like the oxygen 3 line I mentioned, or a hydrogen emission line or something else. If it was a very, very narrow filter, you would probably be surprised at what it looks like because you would not see a lot of the stuff you're used to seeing because that is in other wavelengths of light. If you were to go to a more wideband filter, such as all green light, so maybe something from maybe 500 nanometers to 580 nanometers in width, as opposed to 505 to 510. So we're talking about broadening that spectrum by a factor of a lot. Then the Sombrero Galaxy would look a lot more like what you're used to seeing, just black and white.
And now I'm going to talk to you about former presidents not being able to drive? ? Being president of the United States, POTUS, as people in the know say, obviously comes with some perks. You get to be the most powerful person in the free world, and you have people talk about you on late night television. But what happens after you leave office? Do you still get perks? Indeed you do. From Wikipedia's page on the Former Presidents Act, by law, former presidents are entitled to a pension, staff and office expenses, medical care or health insurance, and Secret Service protection. $220,000 a year is a pension, which is a lot of money to most people. Yeah. But as a former president, you can sometimes make more than that just by giving one speech.
Oh, for sure.
What an interesting world. Anyway, that seems pretty good. You have all these little things going on, got some protection. But are there any downsides? Oh, there sure are. I often say that there are pros and cons to everything, and being a former president does indeed have some cons as well. Focusing on the title of this segment first, it turns out that former presidents aren't allowed to drive. Yes, former presidents can't drive, and the primary reason is security. You'll see that Secret Service protection and the stipulations or protocols that come with Secret Service protection are the main ways that former presidents are restricted, and I tell you other things, but for a moment, driving. Roads and driving are dangerous to begin with, let alone if you are a potentially important target. Presidents are too valuable, and they're not trained in evasive and defensive driving maneuvers like those in the Secret Service are.
Oh, wild.
But surely they can drive somewhere. Yes, on their secured property, as George W. Bush did driving around his ranch, and as Obama did on Seinfeld's Comedians in Cars with Coffee.
I was going to say this. Obama talks about this with Seinfeld.
So he had to stay on his own property just to do the show.
Right, but at that time, when I saw the thing with Obama, that was Obama, the current president. I didn't realize...
Yeah.
You can't drive ever.
Wow.
So what else? Well, similarly, again, think of Secret Service protection. They can't really go anywhere alone. They can't fly commercial. They can't simply go to events like concerts, sporting events, parties, shows. If they do want to attend, say, a performance by or with one of their children, it has to be planned in advance, and it could be a logistical nightmare, to say the least.
Wow.
Presidents also have their mail searched, and they pretty much are pretty sure to have their technology monitored, or supposedly. Phones, emails, everything. Now, I'm going to provide one more example that may mostly apply to when a president is in office, and less so when they are out of office. But since it seems like it's from the Middle Ages, I thought it was worth talking about. The president requires a food taster.
Wow.
No.
Oh, wow.
While some articles indicate that this is not an official policy confirmed by the Secret Service, there is good evidence to indicate it exists. Now, Medium has a piece about Joey Chestnut being Trump's food taster, but this piece might be satire, so let's put that aside.
100%.
Yes, given that there's a little strip that says truth and satire. Now, Snopes is more reliable, and in their examination of this claim, they discuss a Senate committee meeting Obama attended that was on Capitol Hill when Obama was president, and Snopes quotes a report that largely then quotes Senator Susan Collins. When asked whether Obama ate, she said, this is Susan, quote, "Unfortunately, the president can't. He looked longingly at it. He honestly did look longingly at it, but apparently he has to have essentially a taster. And I pointed out to him that we were all tasters for him, and that if the food had been poisoned, all of us would have keeled over. But he did look longingly at it, and he remarked that we have far better food than the Democrats do, and I said that was because I was hosting." End quote. So imagine that. Most powerful person on Earth, you can start a nuclear war and you can't have lunch. It's not just Obama, as there is also indications of other presidents having food tasters as well.
While they were serving or afterwards?
Well, it's mainly while they were serving.
Okay.
Who does this? It's often a Navy mess specialists. They oversee preparation and safety. So they're going out to dinner somewhere. And then the Navy people arrived hours ahead of time to oversee all the food production.
Wow.
Wait a minute. Didn't Clinton go to McDonald's?
Yes.
Every meal anywhere requires a food taster? Well, like many things in life, there's what it says in laws and policies, even unofficial policies, and what happens in the real world. The Secret Service has legal authority to protect the president and former presidents and their families, but the president has to be a willing participant. What does that mean? Well, in some cases, you could imagine they're going to rush the president to a bunker during a threat of war, regardless of what the president wants, and they might actually pick the person up and carry them. Wow. But in other cases, multiple years, you're retired, you want to do something, Secret Service is there. There may have to be informal bargains made about what a former president will allow a Secret Service detail to do, some give and take to provide security while still having some freedoms. But it's not driving on a normal street. I was thinking, if you're a food taster, some food, if it's poison, does take multiple hours to take effect. So are they really just focusing on the immediate poisons? Because if you're a food taster, I don't see how it works if you're outside in the world. You're going to wait 12 hours? And Snopes does highlight other presidents. There's food tasters that arrive ahead of time. There's photographs. People understand this is what goes on. So it is definitely the case that this occurs in at least some domains some of the time.
Yeah.
It could be probabilistic. Like if there's a known event that the president is known to attend, that might be a more likely target than a random quick stop at a McDonald's.
Yeah. I'm not poisoning every Big Mac that comes out of this McDonald's.
Right. It's be pretty unlikely. And you could imagine that okay, they walk in, does a Secret Service agent walk behind the counter in McDonald's and watch them make it?
Yeah.
When you think about freedom and power, if you're going to a drive-thru in your car, you are transcending the powers of the President of the United States. Thanks for joining us once again, listeners. Cristina told us that essential oils are not really that safe for kids, and I don't think they're really safe for the sanity of adults. We once again appreciate Stu sharing his wealth of knowledge about how photos are colorized in the world of space. And I talked to you about former presidents not being able to drive. Until next time, think better to act better.
Peace out, cuboids.
Stay classy and not smart-assy.
We'll talk to you soon, everyone.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at TRC_podcast.
Outtakes. It doesn't mean we have the same dad.
This could be a topic for a different show.
Am I boring you?
Use that voice for everything now. The essential oils.
This whole show is a lie.
That's funny.